morning, church. Good morning. An honor and a pleasure to introduce our guest speaker this morning, Mr. Archie Griffin. Born in University Hospital in Columbus, Ohio, attending Columbus Public Schools, and then the Ohio State University. I've had the pleasure of knowing Archie for many years. He's been a friend, a confidant, and a trustworthy member of our neighborhood and community. He served at the university as president and CEO of Ohio State University Alumni Association. He's been a speaker and representing many of our community activities. He's represented our university highly and very well, and the only two-time winner of the Heisman Trophy. He's a three-time All-American. He's a three-time All-American, 1972 to 75, and a 1976 graduate with a degree in industrial relations. He was a first-round draft pick of the Cincinnati Bengals, co-captain, and played 7 years as a professional. After reading Archie's bio, which I was completely unaware of his philanthropy and his service to our community, the one quote that I heard before, repeated in the bio, from his former football coach, Mr. Woody Hayes, that Archie was a better person than he was football player. Now, I can testify to his friendship, his heart, his soul, not only his, but also his entire family. He's a sought-out speaker and humanitarian. He serves on many boards and foundations. So Archie's a proud moment on my part to listen to you speak later on and to welcome you to our Bethany family. And for a complete look at Archie's bio, there's a flyer, I believe, hopefully in your program. Please review it, because we talk about serving. We talk about all the platitudes of doing this, that, and the other thing for our community. But in a few minutes, there's going to be a gentleman who's going to take this podium. And he truly represents what we talk about community, sportsmanship, and citizenship. So I hope you give him your undivided attention. And once again, Archie, thank you for doing this, and welcome to our Bethany family. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, let me say thank you to Clem, because he well knows that he has been a role model for me for many years. Ever since I was at Livermore Junior High School here in Columbus, and watching Jim at Linden McKinley High School, and going through Ohio State University, and through professional basketball and coaching and the whole work. So it is an honor, a true honor, to be introduced by you, Jim. But I got to tell you, listening to that introduction, it really kind of reminded me of the man who was introduced as being a great speaker, great personality, just an all-around fine person. He was so impressed with his introduction, he could hardly wait to hear what he was going to say. So in silence, he meditated on his greatness, and all of a sudden he interrupted the silence by asking his wife. He said, honey, I wonder how many really great people there are in this world today. She looked up at him and said, I don't know, but there's one less than you think. Jim, I appreciate those very, very, very kind words that you had to say about me. And thank goodness my wife's not here, so she can really say that to me right now. Now, let me ask you a question. Has everybody recovered from that Buckeye game last week? I got to tell you, that was a thrilling game. That win over Notre Dame was really, really huge. And I got to tell you, I had to lay down for about a couple of days to get over that thing. Now, I know we got some Buckeyes here, and Reverend Lewis, I hope you don't mind me doing this, but if I said OH, what do you say? OH. All right, I like that. I really do. That's not bad. Now I got to tell you though, we won't be inviting you to lead cheers in our student section, but we definitely have some proud Buckeyes feeling the spirit in the house today, and I certainly greatly appreciate that. Before I go any further, I would like to thank Ann Walker of WSU fame and Bethany Presbyterian Church. I want to thank her for inviting me to this 105th anniversary celebration. And you know, when Ann asks you to do anything, you just do it. I mean, you don't ask any questions. You just do it. And Ann, I appreciate you inviting me here today. I'd also like to thank Reverend Lewis for lending me his pulpit here for a few minutes. And Reverend Lewis, I want you to know that I'll do my best to return it to you in tip-top shape. What I'm going to do here this morning is just spend a few minutes today talking to you a little bit about my life, some lessons I have learned along the way, and how it relates to your church, its history, and its mission. As I was reading about the origin story of your church, I learned about how this church was originally established in 1918 as the need for a ministry serving black folks developed here thanks to black migration from the South to Columbus in the 1910s and 1920s. The Great Migration, as the history books call it, was one of the most rapid mass internal movements in world history. It literally changed the course of American history and altered our nation in profound economic, political, and social dimensions that we are still coming to terms with today. It was a movement of 6 million black folks out of the terror of Jim Crow into an uncertain existence in the North and Midwest, is how historian Isabel Wilkerson sums it up in her wonderful Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Warmth of Other Suns. Without the Great Migration, we wouldn't have the explosion of art, music, and literature that we know as the Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s. Without the Great Migration, we may never have come to the music of the great bluesmen like Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and Buddy Guy, who traveled north from the Mississippi Delta to Chicago. Without the Great Migration, we don't have this church we sit in today, and hundreds like it that were created in its aftermath to minister to the new urban black population. It was a movement of people fleeing discrimination, segregation, and the Jim Crow political system that left them powerless. But it was also about the economic opportunities that jobs in the steel mills, auto plants, railroads, meatpacking plants, and other places of steady employment brought to black folks as our nation's industrial strength grew. And that's where my own family's history intersects with this chapter from our nation's history. Like millions of black American families, my own family participated in this exodus to the great cities of the North as my parents sought better economic opportunities for their growing family in the early 1950s. For the Griffins, it meant leaving some rough and tumble mining towns in rural West Virginia and heading north up Route 23 right here to Columbus. It's my family story, but it's a classic American tale of faith and hope, and it's how I came to be born in August of 1954 at the Ohio State University Hospital. You see, my mother and father, James and Margaret Griffin, scrambled to keep food on the table as the family eventually grew to 8 children, my 6 brothers, myself, and my baby sister, Kristen. My father was a very, very hard worker. My father worked 3 jobs most of his life. He was a sanitation worker for the city of Columbus. He was a steel worker for the Ohio Malibu Steel Casting Company. And he was a janitor who spent his precious time off going to see his children play sports. So he taught us all we needed to know about hard work by the simple eloquence of his example. There was never question that all 8 of his children would work hard. And there was never a question that all 8 of his children would go to college. And let me tell you, all 8 of us did go to college on athletic scholarships, and all 8 of us graduated from college. And this was the accomplishment in the Griffin household that meant the most to my parents. Now, a lot of people ask me, how did you get to Ohio State University? Well, it's a great story, actually, because a lot of people thought when I was coming out of high school that I was not going to go to Ohio State University. They thought I'd be going to Northwestern University because when I was being recruited, Northwestern was the school that recruited me first. But I was very fortunate. I attended Eastmore High School here in Columbus, and at Eastmore, I participated in 3 sports. I played football, I wrestled, and I ran track, and I had a lot of success in all 3 of those sports. But it was quite evident that the game of football was a sport that would take me a little bit further. Well, coming out of high school and going through that recruiting process, it was tough. But I found out during the recruiting process, when I was taking my visit to Northwestern, where I found out where I really was going to go to school. And let me tell you how that happened. Ohio State kind of recruited me late, but Northwestern was the very first school that recruited me. And because of that, I was giving Northwestern the edge of where I was going to go. I remember taking my visit to Northwestern. It was my official visit. My father took off his job at the Ohio Malibu to take me to the airport. Now, my father wouldn't normally do that when I was going on recruiting visit. My mother, who stayed at home, she would always take me to the airport when I was going on a recruiting visit. But this particular day, my father took me to the airport. Well, I got in the car, we drove down to the airport, and right before I got out of the car, my father leaned over to me, and he said, we'd like to be able to see you play. And when he said that, it hit me. It made me realize that I needed to stay home because at the time, 2 of my older brothers, Larry and Daryl, Larry was at the University of Louisville playing football, and Daryl was at Kent State University playing football. And my mother and father on Saturday afternoons would drive north to Kent State University to watch Daryl play in the afternoon, and then they drive all the way back south to the University of Louisville to catch Larry playing a night game at the University of Louisville. And that had to be really, really tough, but I didn't think about that at that time. But when my father mentioned we would like to be able to see you play, that made me realize that the best thing for me was to stay right here in Columbus at the Ohio State University. And you don't have to clap for that because I'm so glad that I did. Now, when I was coming out of high school and Ohio State was recruiting me, I want you to know that a lot of people told me that I shouldn't go to Ohio State. They said, Archie, you're too small. Coach Hayes, he only recruits the big backs, well over 200 pounds. You ought to go to a smaller school where you're going to get a good chance to play. Well, being an athlete, I felt I knew my abilities better than anyone else, so I took it as a challenge to go to Ohio State. And I'll never forget, when I reported to camp in the summer of 1972, now 1972 was the very first year that freshmen were eligible to play varsity football. And with that being the case, the number one goal for me was to make the varsity team because I wanted to prove to everybody who said that I could not play at Ohio State, I wanted to prove to them that I could play at Ohio State. Well, when I reported to camp in that summer of 1972, I was put at the back. And put at the back meant playing on the 15th. And playing on the 15th meant playing on the scout squad. And I think some of you know what that is. That's more or less the meat squad. We were the guys that took the beating every day in practice from the first teamers. Our job was to run the opposing team plays while the first team defense got their practice off of us. Now, you talking about discouraging. That was really discouraging because for some strange reason, that first team defense seemed to know what plays we were running and when we were running. And as a running back, he couldn't gain any yardage at all against that first team defense. Well, that year, our first game was a home game, and it was against the University of Iowa. And because it was a home game, Coach Woody Hayes, he allowed everybody to dress because he believed that if you practice for Ohio State, then you should be identified in an Ohio State University uniform at a home game. And I was really happy about that because that at least showed that I was part of the team, even though there were 3 number 45s out on the field there. Well, the night before every home game, Coach Hayes, he'd take the varsity, which was about 60 players or so, he'd take them off campus to a hotel. And we as freshmen and reserves, we would stay in a dormitory, and we'd meet up with the varsity the day of the game at the stadium. Well, that game against Iowa started, and we were beating Iowa pretty bad. And in the fourth quarter, with a couple minutes to go in the game, Coach Hayes decided to give a few freshmen an opportunity to play. And I was one of those freshmen, and I can remember him calling me off the bench to go into the game. I remember going into the game thinking, wow, this is my big chance. If I could get in this game, run for a touchdown, and maybe just make a big play, maybe he'll put me on that varsity team. And again, that was my goal. I wanted to be a part of varsity. I wanted to prove that I could play at Ohio State University. Well, I got in the game, got in the huddle, and to my surprise, the first play called was an 18 sweep. Now, an 18 sweep was a pitch out to me going around the right side. Now, this was a great opportunity for me. We broke the huddle, lined up in the iron formation, and our quarterback started calling the signal. And as he started calling the signals, I got to thinking, I said, you know, I wonder if our offensive line is going to open up the same type of hole for me as they've opened up for our other running backs to run through, because all day long, they've been making these big, huge holes for our running backs to run through. And I just wondered, were they going to do the same thing for me? Well, the ball was snapped. And as soon as the ball was snapped, I did something that was fundamentally wrong. You see, if you're a running back or a receiver and you're going to get a pitch out or a pass, one of the fundamental things that you're taught from day one is that you've got to look the ball into your hands. You've got to watch it come from the quarterback's hand right into your own hand. Well, when the ball was snapped, the first thing that I did is I focused my attention on the hole which I was going to run through. And when I looked towards that hole, I was shocked because those guys had opened up a hole big enough you could drive a truck through it. I mean, the hole was just that big. So instead of me turning back towards the quarterback and watching that ball come into my hands, I kept my eyes on that hole because I wanted to make sure it didn't go anywhere. Me with my eyes on the hole, the quarterback pitched the ball to me, the ball hit me in the hands, and I fumbled. Now, when you play for Coach Woody Hayes, that's just one thing you don't do, is you do not fumble. Coach Hayes did not like fumbling. And I got to tell you something. He didn't like me that day. He took me out of the game, and as you can imagine, I was very disappointed. I was crushed, to be exact. I felt as if I had blown my big opportunity. I felt that I had blown my chance. I remember going home that night, and my father sensed something was wrong with me. He asked me about it. And I said, Daddy, I don't know that I'll get another chance. I'm 15 tailback. I'm on the scout squad. I just fumbled, and I'm a freshman. I don't know that I'll get another chance this year. Well, my father, like he'd always do, he gave me encouragement. He told me to keep working hard. He said, Archie, they feel like you can play. They wouldn't have put you in the game if they didn't think that you could play. What you got to do is go back, continue to work hard, and you'll get your shot. Well, I didn't really know that that would be the case, because here I was, barely out of high school. I'm thinking my Ohio State career was effectively over. I thought I had blown it. But I tell you, what kept me going was my faith. I believe in God, I believe in the Bible, and I've always read the Bible. And there's a verse in the Bible that I leaned on, and I still lean on today. And it's the verse in the book of James, first chapter, 2nd through 4th verse, where it says, "Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance be the perfect result, making you perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." It doesn't say if you have trials. It says when you have trials. And to me, that simply means, is simply saying that when you have tough times or when you fumble the ball, it is a test of your faith and endurance. You see, what that fumble taught me is that your failures in life do not define you. How you handle that adversity, how you pick yourself up off the ground and come back the next day is the true measure of your worth. On that Saturday, September afternoon in 1972, over 4.5 centuries ago, I had fumbled the ball of my first carry. I went back to practice that next week. I was still on the scout squad. I was still on the 15. I was still taking that beating every day from the first teamers. But that next weekend, we also had a home game. And that next weekend, that home game was against the University of North Carolina on September 30th, 51 years ago from yesterday. That home game, Coach Hayes, he allowed everybody to dress again the night before the game. He took the varsity away to the hotel. We as freshman reserves, we stayed in the dormitory. We met up with the varsity the day of the game at the stadium. That game against North Carolina, first quarter started. North Carolina blocked a punt of ours. And they went ahead of us 7-0. And all of a sudden, midway through the first quarter, a call from the bench called Griffin. Kept calling Griffin. I knew he wasn't talking to me. Couldn't be me. I'm a 15-year-old man from on the scout squad. I had fumbled the week before, and I was a freshman. Not many Division I coaches believed that freshmen could play Division I football at that time. But they kept calling Griffin. And I was the only Griffin on the team at the time. So I walked up to Coach Hayes, and he grabbed me by the shoulder pad and told me to go in and tailback. Well, right then I got all excited, went to run out onto the field. When I went to run out onto the field, one of my teammates called me back. Because in all the excitement, I had forgotten to take my helmet with me. Could not believe that he had meant for me to go into the game. Again, I was a 15 tailback, working on the scout squad, just fumbled the week before, and a freshman. How could he have meant for me to go into the game? It was truly a mystery to me. But all I can tell you is that I got myself together. I went into the game, and my number was being called. And I'll be honest with you, I was in a daze the whole time. But my number was being called, and I was running with the ball. I know that I played about 2.5 quarters because I came out of the game in the beginning of the fourth quarter. And when I came out of the game in the beginning of the fourth quarter, the 86,000 fans that were in Ohio Stadium, they stood up and gave me a standing ovation. And they did that because in those 2.5 quarters, I had rushed for 239 yards, which at that time was Ohio State's rushing record. Thank you. And I want all of you to know that I will never, ever, ever forget that moment. I will never forget that moment because it was the most exciting moment I ever had playing the game of football. And I want you to know I played a lot of football. I started off when I was 9 years old over here at Maryland Park, Saunders Park now, when I played for the Maryland ACs. And I played my last game when I was with the Cincinnati Bengals. And I got to tell you, I played in a lot of great games. I played against that team up north 4 straight times. And just so you know, I never lost to them either. I played in 4 Rose Bowls, and I played in the Super Bowl. But that still was the most exciting moment I ever had playing the game of football. Now, why did that happen for me over 50 years ago? In some ways, I will never know, as I count it as a miracle. The convergence of time and space and opportunity that changed my life forever. But I do know this. A little part of it happened that day because my failure did not define me. That humble did not define me. Because I kept working hard, because I found a joy, a silver lining, no, I should say a scarlet and gray lining, in the test of my faith that produced endurance and made me better. And as I tell you that, I want you to also know that the night before that game, the night before that North Carolina game, when I prayed as I do every night, I asked the Lord up above to give me the chance to play in that game, and when he gives me the chance to help me play to the best of my ability. And he did that for me. And I am so very, very thankful for that. I count it as a miracle. And you know, as I read about your church, you know, I learned your congregation is part of the bread movement in Columbus that focuses on building equality and dignity in Columbus and Franklin County by working on important issues like affordable housing, education, criminal justice reform, and health care. Those are extremely important projects, and I thank you for the work you put into that. It makes a difference. But you do it because you seek greater justice in our world and because you want a brighter tomorrow for future generations. And I mention that because I hear echoes of that message when I think about the single most important lesson I learned from my old coach and mentor, Woody Hayes. Woody constantly preached to all of us about the importance of paying forward. It was a line from his favorite author, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it says that you can never pay back those who helped you, but you must pay forward to the next generation, line for line and deed for deed. And that is why my wife, Benita, and I have established the Archie and Bethany Griffin Foundation Fund at the Columbus Foundation, where we support educational sports programs for young people in Central Ohio and beyond. That is also why I started the Archie Griffin Scholarship Fund, which provides scholarship funding for athletes in Olympic sports at the Ohio State University. I got a college scholarship, and I want to make sure others get college scholarships to provide them an education. But it's also why I spent so much time in my life talking to young people, trying to get them to harness the great God-given potential that lies inside of them. Let me finish here today by saying to you, as I wrap up here, that I hope that I've given you a few things to think about from my life story and that of the larger Griffin family. Maybe it reminded you of your own family story and how your family ended up right here in Columbus. Maybe it reminded you of a fumble you had in your own life and how you fought to overcome it. But whatever the case might be, I want you to know that I appreciate the time and attention you have given me today. I thank you for all the work that your congregation does to make Columbus a more fair and equal place, and I hope you'll consider joining me in paying forward to the next generation. With that, I thank you all so very, very much. God bless each and every one of you, and I have to say, go Bucks!